Howdy, friends. Welcome to another edition of VulnU. Glad to have you here. We are bright and early here in Austin, Texas for a long weekend. And today we are going to talk about empathy and how it relates to cybersecurity. And then we're going to talk about some of the top news, including MOVEit is still having problems. I know I talked about it last week. Still popping up all over the place. Fortinet and Barracuda, the actual hardware, pizza boxes, firewalls, spam filters, VPNs are having just a really bad week. TikTok ban and how that is enforceable in certain states or isn't. Some critical Chrome bugs came out. I'm going to chat about that. And then I found two really good reports of some malware that I wanted to talk about. So let's get into it. So first off, on empathy. On this week's newsletter, I wrote about 5 different ways that cultivating empathy can be used as a skill in cybersecurity, not just making you a better person or superior to anyone else, or have a complex about how empathetic you are, but no, truly understanding other people that are in information security, including your adversaries. So that's the first one right off the bat, is understanding threat actors, understanding their motivations. Are they financially motivated? As we went through last week with the DBIR, said something, some crazy percentage, I don't have it in front of me, are financially motivated attackers. Or are they politically motivated or espionage as their motivation? Truly understanding your threat actors helps you understand your threat model and what defenses you need to put in place, right? But besides understanding your threat actor, in security, you also have to understand your users, especially if you're a blue team member and you're building security at your organization. You need to understand your users and their use cases of how they do their jobs. Sorry, my dog is walking around in the background behind me. That's what you hear, if you hear the background noise. So truly understanding your user and understanding how it is that they do their jobs is the only reason you have a job as a security team, right? So you can't be the team of no. You can't add so much friction to do your normal job that to make it more secure that it becomes impossibly slow to do. You have to find that balance, right? And empathy allows you to put on the shoes of the users that you're trying to protect and understand what it is that they do to do their jobs. So things that we've seen that have gotten a lot better at user experience in security, just little ones that you'll recognize, right? If you have an iOS device, when you get a text message of an authentication code for either SMS or some other multi-factor authentication, that Apple will say, "Hey, you want to use that code that you just got in your text message?" Just that little feature alone will improve the adoption of things like MFA by understanding the user experience when it comes to using tokens. Even just like remember this device for 30 days, right? That's a balance of a threat model and a user story. We're seeing the explosion of zero trust architecture, right? Instead of a cumbersome VPN or making everyone be at a certain physical location, we're seeing the ability for employees to do their jobs from anywhere, right? In order to increase usability, but then how to do that securely, right? And we're seeing a lot of security tools around that space. Some bad examples of this, right? We have security teams of the past that used to run a bunch of tools, find a bunch of findings, and then send a report over the fence to a bunch of developers with an SLA saying, "Hey, you need to fix this by this time, or you'll be dinged," or something like that, right? That's really not understanding and sitting in the shoes of the developer. We've trended towards tools that integrate more seamlessly into the developer experience in that way. I think empathy has played a big role in all of these user experience stories getting better while staying more secure. The third thing that I bring up is supporting victims. So in cybersecurity, there's going to be victims of breaches. If there wasn't, we wouldn't have jobs, right? We wouldn't be protecting against anything if nothing ever happened. So I'm big on this one because we've all been there, right? A lot of us have been there. A lot of us have been through the sleepless nights of incident response and the follow-up aftermath of lawyers or user notification or anything like this. Even though you spent, months, years building protections around this data, you had a bad day. Something happened, right? Understanding this, understanding how we could support each other through this is critical, right? I put a big quote here that I thought of when I was typing that said, if everyone was getting hacked in silence, we'd have no idea what to protect ourselves from. So if we can support each other through these moments, we will be more likely to share and understand what each of us are protecting from. The fourth thing I talk about, one of our big parts of our job is training and awareness. The empathy can allow you to build security training and awareness training that is finely tuned toward the actual human being, right? The human factor is sometimes the weakest factor in an attack chain, right? Whether it's social engineering or phishing or anything like that. Being empathetic of where someone comes to the table with their cybersecurity knowledge can go a long way when understanding what we have to train them for. So we can't expect everyone to come to any company and know all about phishing and how to read email headers or how to detect what a URL is actually pointed to or how to spot a fake URL. Not everyone's going to be experts in this stuff. So putting yourself in their shoes, what are they an expert in? What language do they speak? How can I meet them where they are? That can be really powerful. And then fifth, I kind of touched on it a little bit, but promoting collaboration and cooperation. I talked about this a few episodes ago with the loneliness epidemic, that Infosec is a very lonely profession by nature. And we tend to live in silos. We tend to, for various reasons, not share a whole lot of what it is that we do all day. There are a whole bunch of incidents that we've all lived through that we can't talk about, or findings on a pen test that are under NDA. I understand the reason for a lot of this, and a lot of this can't change for legal and regulatory reasons. But sometimes it's rather unnecessary, and sometimes it's built around fear of what the world is going to say about what the pen test finding was or what it is that you went through in a data breach. And I'm seeing more and more small communities of trust build up and be like invite only, come into my circle of trust, and we will share here about what we're going through, and we can cooperate. This didn't really exist in the same scale that I'm seeing it today, and I think we could still do better. These small circles of trust are a privilege to be a part of, but we can cultivating empathy and approaching these topics with a sense of empathy will allow more people to feel more comfortable about sharing what they're going through. All right, that's the topic of empathy. I shared there's a few podcasts and a few links throughout there and resources in the newsletter if you want to check it out and read more about that. So let's get on to the news. So first off, we got MOVEit. We talked about it last week. It seems to still be wreaking havoc. The Clop ransomware group, as we talked about, is still talking about victims publicly, or victims are coming forward and saying that they've demanded ransom from them, and that MOVEit was their entry point. If you missed last week's, MOVEit is an enterprise file transfer service, has a critical vulnerability in it as that's public as of last week. This week it came forward that the Energy Department was one of several federal agencies that is dealing with this. I think it was even through a contractor, something to do with their trash, but still, had access to the Energy Department infrastructure. So you can read more about that. Next up, TikTok has been in the news a lot. I think I might do a whole conversation about this because I've talked about it a few times publicly, even outside of my Infosec bubble, and people are super interested in the headlines that TikTok ban is making. Some states have come forward. I think Montana was the first that said, hey, TikTok is banned from our state. There's a few problems with that. I don't know how enforceable it is. I also don't know how technically feasible it is. Is Apple or Google going to develop new app store functionality that understands your region that you are in and allows you to access a different version of that app store or some subset of an app store? And what happens if you're traveling and you're not from there and you have that app on your phone? Can you not make DNS requests to that app while you're within that state? I also think the fines on this are fairly low. I think it was something like $10,000 a day for Apple if they didn't comply, which is like a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of money that it would cost to develop this App Store functionality. So this might just be a pay the fine type thing. But the news this week is about security concerns around TikTok without banning it. So there's just a lot of talk and frankly, in my opinion, a lot of misunderstanding about TikTok, its relationship with its parent company, ByteDance, its relationship with China. If anyone watched the congressional hearings of the CEO of TikTok, I felt really bad for that guy. He just kept getting grilled by people that had no idea what they were talking about. I think one of the more famous memes around that was a congressperson asking, "Does TikTok access my home Wi-Fi?" And a CEO just saying, like, how else do you think it gets to the internet, right? Just like, how do you say that politically? Also kept getting accused of being part of the CCP. And he's like, I'm from Singapore. I'm not even from China. So a lot of just complete misunderstandings. I don't really know where I stand on the political side of TikTok and our relationship with China. But I know that TikTok has an American security team, and we have friends that work there. And I don't think that I distrust my fellow American security professionals that much. So that's what I'll say about that. Next bit of news, huge Chrome drop of a few vulnerabilities, including a critical one in the payments function. So that autofill payment feature had a bug in it this week, and including that was one of 4 vulnerabilities, which some of them were use after free vulnerabilities, which are always really nasty in the browser. Either way, if you're listening to this, update your Chrome. I found this article and Chrome hadn't even let me know of the update yet, but I had to manually go out and install it. And so I'm glad I did. All right, next, I talked a lot about this on Twitter this week. If you follow me, Fortinet is having just a really bad week. So on Shodan, there is over 250,000 Fortinet devices that are publicly available on the internet. So 250,000. That's not including devices that aren't indexed on Shodan and might be accessible via some private internet means, or if you're on a Wi-Fi network that then something isn't exposed publicly, you might be able to see some more devices than this 250,000. But this is what's accessible on the internet, and there's a very bad remote code execution vulnerability in the firewall devices themselves. This is only if you have the SSL VPN feature enabled, but I think a lot of those devices on the internet do. At the time that I wrote the Twitter thread, it was just theorized that the Vault Typhoon attacker group that Microsoft has been tracking and writing about, I talked about in a previous newsletter, maybe last week or the week before, when they attacked Guam and the critical infrastructure there in relation to potential strategic relations with Taiwan and America and Guam and all this kind of stuff. Their MO is to attack critical infrastructure and network devices like this. So it was theorized that this bug could, be right up their alley. And since writing this Twitter thread a few days ago and recording this today on Friday, it is confirmed that they are using this bug. So this is a pretty nasty one. If you manage any Fortinet devices at this point, you should definitely still be running to go patch them. But at this point, you might even need to do a bit of threat hunting to see if things have already been exploited. So I link in my Twitter thread to all sorts of resources dissecting the vulnerability itself if you're interested in that. And also Fortinet released a hardening guide besides just the patch and update flow from this particular firmware upgrade, but just various other hardware hardening tips. So staying on the topic of hardware firewall devices, Barracuda also had a really bad week. And I linked an article this week that Mandiant actually did some research, and that the Barracuda vulnerability that came out in the last few weeks has been actively exploited as well, with links to China. I also link an article on Krebs's site that talks about how Barracuda's guidance on this is to actually scrap the hard device. You might actually have to go and unscrew this pizza box from your rack if it's doing spam filtering for you, if you're running your own mail servers, all this kind of stuff. If you're using some of these Barracuda devices, you might actually have to scrap the hard piece of device. There might not be a way to update and patch. There is a patch available, but they've got guidance that says, hey, maybe it's time to get rid of some of these old devices and buy some new ones. All right, that's it in the hardware vulnerability space. So moving on, I found two very good reports about malware this week. It's not a topic that I dive deep into often, but when I do, and when there is digestible content on it, malware is a pretty deep hole. And if you're not an expert on it, sometimes it's very hard to read. But Trend Micro put out a report this week about fully undetectable malware. FUD, I like the acronym. A malware called different malwares using a technique called the Backcloak obfuscation engine. This is a obfuscation engine that helps malware become undetectable. And in their research, over 80% of samples of malware that used this Backcloak obfuscation engine were not detected by any malware, any modern malware detection techniques. I've included a graphic of it in my newsletter, but the report is very long and very detailed and very good. So if you're interested in undetectable malware, definitely go check it out. So staying on the malware topic, there is a malware group seemingly out of Russia named Vidar that is an info stealer malware campaign. And Team Simru, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, released a very good report. They've been tracking this threat actor for quite a while. They have they go through their backfill of information of what they've shared previously, but they have some critical updates about this threat actor and how they're behaving and what that could mean for you if you are dealing with this threat actor, if they are going after anyone in your organization, or if you've been part of any incident response with this malware. Some of the information that they have to share in this report might be super useful to you, including new indicators of compromise, new details about their infrastructure that this group has stood up. It seems they're rotating some of their back-end infrastructure, and they're favoring providers in Moldova and Russia. It seems like they've evolved some of their techniques to anonymize themselves using various public VPN services. And it seems they have a domain, my-odin.com, that is their malware, their main malware domain. And by tracking activity around that domain, they were able to illuminate some other techniques and bits about their infrastructure that are helpful in responding to any of the info stealer malware campaigns that might be going on. All right, that's it in malware. And then one last bit, another very detailed report. This is on the dfirreport.com. This is an outline of a wiper attack, an actual truly destructive attack. You don't see these that often these days, where someone gets infected by malware, some information is stolen, and then actually destroyed or wiped while they had access to it. A, that's rare these days. B, it's even more rare for that to have been caught and have a write-up this detailed about it. So the report's called A Truly Graceful Wipeout, and I highly recommend reading through it if you're interested in this sort of thing. So that's the news this week. Thank you all for tuning in. I am recording this bright and early because I am on my way to the beach for the weekend. So I will do some editing and all that and get this out. And you will all be hearing this by Monday, and I hope you have a great week. Thanks for tuning in.